Lucah, Born of a Dream, is a very abstract game in almost every way. The presentation can leave a lot of the events to the player's interpretation, and the narrative of the game is shrouded in themes of trauma, depression, and terror. Environments are barely etched into the black background, and enemies often appear as a collection of shapes instead of a single, coherent being. The player's attacks aren't sword swings, punches, or bullets, but instead are slashes of color tearing through the blackness. Narrative events are often conversations discussing the fallout of the most recent events, but they never truly explain what has transpired. Only that something has changed now, and it's all your fault. The game opens on a conversation, maybe. It reads somewhat like a psychiatrist consultation in which the doctor is encouraging their patient to tell them about their dreams. And then the game begins. So perhaps the entire game is framed as this consultation with the doctor. It might be, but this certainly drives the theme of trauma and depression, in my opinion anyway. Like I said, it's very abstract. The scratching sounds that plays whenever an enemy appears also gives this impression, that these monsters are manifestations of the pains of the player character's trauma. Most of the monsters are humanoids. Maybe they're representations of the people who caused the trauma. These are my interpretations, and if you intend to play this game after watching this video, I would advise waiting for a while, so you can form your own interpretations. I can see a few other possibilities within this introduction that I won't get into because of the abstractness. Instead, I'll share some impressions of the game overall. One of the aspects that drew me to play Lucah was the combat. It looked strategic, but it had a good sense of speed about it. The screen effects whenever an enemy is hit, the satisfying popping sound of breaking through the defenses, and being at liberty to smack them around in their helpless state gave me an interesting, visceral sense for the violence, despite how it actually looked. And this game is violent, but we'll get to that later. In practice, Lucah's combat is similar to Hyperlight Drifter, and then it invokes that Super Nintendo combat style from games like Terranigma. You attack in short combos and then skitter away to regain stamina before coming back for another combo. Unlike Terranigma, however, the weapon upgrades actually do different things, and combat must be approached differently depending on the upgrade. It keeps the relatively simple combat fresh as you fiddle with the upgrades to find something that fits your desires. Or you can find the perfect dodge upgrade and spend every combat encounter in slow motion. Up to you. There are also a surprising quantity of bosses to encounter, ranging from duels with player-sized characters to battles with giant, abstract monsters. Each fight can boil down to parrying the enemy and battering it until you win, but the stamina limitation prevents this from being a reliable strategy. They all strike a strong balance of engaging with the game's mechanics and the boss's mechanics. These fights also change on subsequent playthroughs, which is a fantastic addition, especially considering that in order to see everything Lucah offers, multiple playthroughs are necessary. I definitely recommend playing Lucah yourself. Draw your own interpretations. However, if you are susceptible to depressed episodes, or you are sensitive to religious stresses, then I'd advise you don't play alone. Have a friend sit nearby and talk with them, because the topics of the narrative get quite intense. I wanted to explore a major narrative point within Lucah, but I could not find a way to do so without falling into a stream of definitions, examples, and context. While I'd happily deliver those thoughts about another game, Lucah has an extremely nihilistic perspective of Christianity, and many of the events within the game seem to be centered around traumatic experiences in a religious context. While I believe this conversation is important and pertinent to discussing the narrative of the game, I have struggled to write an assessment of the events in a way that I find satisfactory. Perhaps I could tackle this subject in the future when I feel I'm more capable of producing something worth saying. Just know that the sting of being deceived by an organization that is supposed to be working in your interests is a pain I am familiar with. And I appreciate that me less than three were capable of delivering this story in a way that the abstraction and the nuance allow the player to decipher meaning, even if the nihilistic perspective is the most visible. I hope you join me next time for a little bit of a lighter subject in From Software's post-apocalyptic dark fantasy setting. I bet you'll never guess.